अलग-अलग buttons थे. 28 buttons इतने से size में. Well, obviously उस time पे we didn't have touch screens. उस time पे I would say for engineers and for professionals it was such a boon. But then again this product failed because it was quite expensive, थोड़ा bulky था and maybe not that easy to use that. But मैं बोलूँगा it was the beginning of the era of smartwatches and eventually today you know how popular they are. जहाँ पे हर किसी से जब आप मिलते हो after the mobile phone, the second purchase that you do as a gadget is definitely a smartwatch these days. Did you know this? If yes, amazing. If no, then please let me know. You know the address. It's tg@ndtv.com.
Stay informed and entertained.
Welcome to India Essence, NDTV's premier international show. I'm Gauri Dwivedi. In this show, I view the world of global politics, global economics, and the buzzing world of technology all through the lens of India, with stories about India's rise, its ascent. So let's get started. Voter apathy, fractured polity is now defining elections in some of the oldest democracies in the world, from France to UK to US. As electorates seek better political choices. Even as research suggests, voter satisfaction highest in young democracies like India. Is it time for political elites in US, UK, France and Iran to stop being delusional about their political setups? Prime Minister Modi visits Russia as his first bilateral summit in his third term. The two countries signed agreements to boost trade and defense ties and enhance cooperation on nuclear energy. Prime Minister Modi also urged Putin to identify solutions to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. NATO turns 75 as the military establishment pledges support for Ukraine. NATO will induct Ukraine as a member, signaling fewer peace options between Russia and the US-led bloc. Indian companies raised a record 2.5 lakh crore rupees in equity markets through IPOs and FPOs during the first half of 2024. Double the amount India Inc. raised last year. Pakistan Finance Minister and Planning Minister are set to be in China to seek restructuring of massive loans under China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Is this the beginning of the end as Pakistan faces dire situation as loan repayment will make its ability to make ends meet zero? And top voices on the show, Atul Keshap, former Charge d'Affaires of US Embassy in India, says India and US ties will not be impacted by the flux in American politics. Pakistani author Salman Masood tells NDTV the volatile situation in Pakistan is unlikely to end anytime soon. The big story on India sets. The last 1 week has seen a lot of activity with elections in UK, France and Iran. But more than the victories, this is a lot about how the leaders have shaped up. Keir Starmer's brute majority, Marine Le Pen so near yet so far, and Masood Pezeshkian's sudden leap into electoral mainstream have a larger theme, and that is of voter apathy, of electorates not being happy with the political choices they are stuck with. And then there is the US election, where recent Washington Post ABC News poll found that half the respondents felt both Donald Trump and Joe Biden are just too old to govern. In effect, they rejected both the choices that they had. The big story on India Sense. Are the political elites in Western democracies delusional about what their voters, their electorates really want? And can they take lessons from the world's largest democracy, India, which seems to be doing far better than some of these democracies? Let's start with UK first. Keir Starmer has a brute majority in the House of Commons. He got there with a nearly 34% vote share. By the way, this is the second lowest in 100 years. This was an election where UK's smaller parties like the Greens, the Reform UK, have had their best showing in the last 111 years. Not since 1913 have voters searched for regional parties for better political choices. Now take a look at the voter turnout. The Institute for Public Policy Research found out that just 52% of UK adults cast their ballots on the 4th of July, which is the lowest turnout by share of population since 1928, when the vote was extended to all adults over the age of 21. In effect, people don't care about the political choices they had. They just don't want any of them that are available. Let's now move on to France, where the French President Emmanuel Macron is breathing a sigh of relief since he managed to stop Marine Le Pen's RN party's march to victory. But there's a lot more to that. RN received 33.2% votes in the first round, just 0.5, half a percent less than neighbouring England, which unleashed the Starmer storm, which swept big names like Liz Truss. Since 1958, voter turnouts in France have fallen steadily, indicating the disillusionment that French voters have with their political class. From the high 70s, it fell to a record of 45% in 2022, only to rebound this year because of tactical voting by every party after the first round. But given how unpopular Macron is, this is a message for a change of guard for the Prime Minister. But that's not what happened. Gabriel Attal continues to fight for another day as Macron figures out what to do with the fractured polity that French landscape is in right now. Let's now move on to Iran, the other place where elections took place in the last 1 week. Its President Masood Pezeshkian, who's supposed to be a moderate, who won when Iranian people felt there's a real possibility of change taking place. The first round saw 40% voting. It's when Pezeshkian survived it that voting percentage rose to almost 50%, 49.8% on your screens. But unlike the UK and France, Iran has a much higher ratio of young people. So what do voter turnouts of 40%, 49.8% tell about people in Iran? That is, there is complete trust deficit when it comes to the political system. They have lost faith in their systems. There are no international observers for Iranian elections. There is no way of verifying their claims about following due process. So one needs to just go back and take it for what it is. Even though doubts regarding the rise in invalid votes indicates that the process was probably scripted, orchestrated maybe. And as for Masood Pezeshkian's reformer credentials, well, guess what? The first thing he did was he reiterated support for terror outfit Hezbollah, suggesting he may not be very different from his predecessors, and his moderate credentials could just be the regime's way of placating the massive anger of Iranians against the draconian regime and the theocratic state that they are stuck with. Let's now move on to US. Voters now there must choose between Democrats and Republicans in each of the 50 states. Essentially, Americans that teach democracy to the world give their people, their own people, a binary choice. But that isn't the case in India, the world's largest democracy, where smaller regional parties are thriving. And in none of the states and UTs of India, voters are stuck with a binary choice. In fact, a start-up political party now rules in 2 Indian states in just a decade. A party that had monopoly over power in 40 years is now struggling for survival. In fact, as per Pew Research Center, India ranks high in the satisfaction index of how democracy is running in their country. On your screens, you can see that it's the high-income nations that are not seeing that. People are dissatisfied with the democracies and the democratic systems they had. I told you that why. Because of voter apathy, the fractured polity that they have. The crisis of confidence that the political elites in UK, France, US, Spain, Italy, I can go on, are facing is acute. Democracy is a journey. And while some nations started this centuries ago, they are now struggling with a political landscape that has not kept pace with the aspirations of their own people. By the way, Indians complain about a lot of things. But what I can say is, democracy and our democratic landscape cannot be one of them. Shifting focus now to the first wide-angle story on India ascents. Prime Minister Modi happens to be one of the few, possibly the only leader in the world who can tell Russian President Putin that the war with Ukraine must end because innocent children are dying. He was in Moscow for his first bilateral summit in his 3rd term. Now, Putin may be courting many countries, but he can count only few as a friend, and Prime Minister Modi happens to be one of them. And there's every reason why Moscow wants to be in New Delhi's good books. For one, there's the economic lifeline that India's oil purchases have given to Moscow. It's allowed it to run its economy, which is hit by American sanctions. India's $66 billion bilateral trade is a key part of Moscow's economy. Much of it is actually India's crude oil purchase. Why does it matter? Well, what is the war machine of Russia like? On an average, Russian army fires about 7,500 to 8,000 rounds every day, and the cost of this is about $3,500 to $4,000. That's the cost, daily cost of this war for the Russians. So it costs them about anywhere between 26 to as much as $32 million. So Putin needs that bilateral trade, which is at $66 billion and growing. Yes, it is less than some of the other countries like China, but by no account does it mean that Putin doesn't need this for his economic reasons and his war machine to continue. But there's another reason. Most importantly, Putin needs to show he's not a global pariah. He has friends. And who better than the leader of the world's largest democracy? Listen in to what Prime Minister Modi and President Putin said when they met in Moscow.
यह भारत और रूस की सदियों पुरानी गहरी मित्रता और आपसी विश्वास का सम्मान है। यह हमारी स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप का सम्मान है।
Находясь уже 10 лет во главе правительства Индии, вы реально способствовали тому, чтобы российско-индийские отношения приобрели характер особо привилегированного стратегического партнерства. При вашей непосредственной поддержке успешно реализуются крупнейшие российско-индийские проекты в торгово-экономической и военно-технической сферах, в атомной и углеводородной энергетике, в области высоких технологий и космоса.
For Putin, closer ties with India could be a leverage to ensure its relationship with China does not become uneven. China is growing, Russia is not. But for Putin, this economic asymmetry should not translate into geopolitical disadvantage. Enter India. China has increased its presence in eastern Russia. In fact, there are in the far east of Russian territory, there's major demographic change that is taking place. Large influx of Chinese migrants is happening. And add to this, the much slowing Russian economy that's been affected by the long-drawn conflict in Ukraine. And the war with Ukraine has brought China and Russia together, but it's a marriage of compulsions, and it may run its course, which is why I feel, unlike some of the other skeptics, Russia will not undermine its strategic interests by taking sides in the Galwan border conflict between India and China. As many Russian scholars insist on vigilant amicability when it comes to Moscow's ties with China, which means keep your guard up. It is India that is your long-term partner, not China. Prime Minister Modi and President Putin meeting was bad optics for America. The visit came on a day when US and its allies were busy making a 75-year-old NATO relevant for a 21st century world order. Why does it matter? Let's get in our first top voice on the show. Ambassador Atul Keshap, who joins me on India Sense. He's former charge d'affaires at US Embassy in India. He now heads US IBC as the first top voice on the show. So thank you so much for speaking to NDTV, speaking to me. I have to ask you this, that US Ambassador to India made a veiled threat to India after the Russia-India bilateral summit. Is this suggestive of how US now views India? It's a blunt question simply because of the very veiled attack that the American ambassador made at India. Everybody knows that India exercises strategic autonomy.
So I think that getting our relationship to attain its maximum potential is extremely important, not only for India and the United States and for our prosperity and stability, but frankly for the entire world. The U.S. and India are the two great pillars of democracy and prosperity in our respective hemispheres. And we have a relationship that stands completely transformed compared to 25 years ago when I started working on this relationship. If you look at virtually every field of human endeavor, we are intensifying our strategic, economic, and technological collaboration. So while there may be some issues where we have to work to understand each other better, it's crucially important that we get U.S.-India right. And if we do, it'll be good for your people and our people and, frankly, all of the free people of the world. And every now and again, there are going to be issues where the governments have to talk to one another and develop a better understanding.
Yes, governments do need to talk to one another, but veiled attacks probably are not the best way of doing so. This is an election year in the US as well. There's a lot of flux and uncertainty that is happening. How do you see that impacting relationship with India?
Well, it requires work. There have been many issues that have been worked on in a constructive manner between both governments over the years, including some very serious issues, crises even at points. And with a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect, we can work through these things. I'm convinced of it. The American business community and the Indian business community are deeply, deeply invested in the success of one another's countries. And they are employing by the millions in our two countries, and they are doing the cutting-edge technological development. Whatever happens between the business communities can serve as a useful ballast in helping stabilize the relationship between the United States and India and making sure that it is for the well-being of all of our people. But this is where governments have a responsibility to talk to one another, and I know that that is happening all the time between Delhi and Washington. Indeed, you have high-level visits in both directions regularly. And I think with greater understanding of each other's compulsions, there may be a way forward that addresses concerns on both sides. So this is what friends do. They work with one another. And really for the United States and India, it's important that we get it right and that we work together on our differences of opinion as friends.
Right. Relationship is stable. It becomes unstable with those kind of remarks. Thanks, Ambassador Keshap, for joining us on India Sense. With that, we're slipping into a very, very short break. We come back with lots more. Stay with us.
Hello, Moto.
Motorola, India's best 5G smartphone brand. NDTV proudly upholds its legacy of trust and credibility. According to the prestigious Reuters Institute's Digital News Report 2024, NDTV is the top-most news platform in the country. Number one in both online and offline reach in India. Beating all its competition, NDTV stands for trust.
Here we are and ये है आप सभी जैसे जानते हैं मेरा पर्सनल फेवरेट सेक्शन जहां पे मैं देता हूं आपके सवालों के जवाब इन दिस सेगमेंट दैट वी कॉल आस्क टीजी। देखते हैं इस एपिसोड में हमको क्या सवाल मिले हैं।
Hi TG, is the Insta360 X4 worth upgrading from the Insta360 X3 camera? Also, do you think there are any other alternatives?
I'll give you my honest takeaway. Insta360 is doing really good in terms of these 360 cameras, action cameras, small cameras and everything. But I would say please don't upgrade to the X4 if you already have an X3 because X3 is really powerful in itself और Insta360 X3 बहुत अच्छे options लेके आता है. It's a well-rounded deal altogether. So if in case you already have it, there is no point for you to upgrade to the X4 or any other camera for that matter. आप उसको अभी use कर सकते हैं for at least I would say एक और साल तक before you see any substantial upgrade in this technology और हो सकता है अगले आने वाले जो मॉडल्स होंगे वो आपको ज़्यादा एक्साइटिंग लगेंगे।
नमस्ते टेक्निकल गुरुजी, मैं ऑनलाइन क्लास में पढ़ती हूँ और मुझसे ज़्यादा टाइम के लिए ईयरफोन्स नहीं पहने जाते। क्या आप मुझे ऐसे ईयरफोन्स या हेडफोन्स सजेस्ट कर सकते हैं जिन्हें हम 3 से 4 घंटे पहन सकें?
मैं आपको 2 सलाह दूंगा मेरी तरफ से। सबसे पहला तो अगर आप ईयरफोन्स यूज़ करते हैं तो उसमें आप ईयर टिप को चेंज करके देखिए बिकॉज कई बार उसका साइज़ अगर आप चेंज करेंगे तो आपको ज़्यादा कंफर्टेबल फील होगा और आप लंबे टाइम तक उनको पहन पाएंगे। सेकेंड थिंग, अगर आपको स्टिल लगता है कि ईयरफोन्स जो है
Welcome back. You're watching India Essence with me, Gauri Dwivedi. The other wide-angle story on the show, Pakistan's deep economic distress. Days after Pakistan's parliament passed a tax-heavy budget to get its 24th IMF bailout, its finance minister and planning minister will be in China for seeking debt relief. But the Chinese will not relent, and I'll tell you why. They have such a good deal that it makes no sense for them to revisit. Firstly, these are not Chinese investments that they've got in Pakistan. These are bonds at 17% interest rate, believe it or not. And unlike most infra loans, which are long-term, Chinese loans are short-term. They're just 10 years, which means payments start even before the projects become operational or start making money. But what's worse about the Chinese loans is that they are not part of Paris Club, the multilateral effort that reduces debt burden for recipient countries. Conveniently, China is not a signatory of Paris Club. And this is the reason why nation after nation is plunging into a debt trap and nothing can be done about it. Pakistan will be the next country. China has built 21 power plants at a cost of $21 billion, of which $15 billion sits on Pakistan's books as debt. Now look at the mess that Pakistan is. On one end, it wants the IMF bailout to survive. And on the other end, it needs to repay these loans which have been taken under the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And with no money left whatsoever, Pakistani government will do only one thing: increase tariffs of electricity to such an extent that it becomes absolutely unaffordable. Well, what does this mean for India? Well, Xi Jinping is not interested in a few $1 billion worth of loans on power projects. He is interested in having a complete hold over Pakistan's finances, assets, and the strategic location it sits on. And this is the reason why Chinese have refused to restructure loans and will refuse it again, because they want Pakistan to be a vassal state. For India, the impact will be twofold. One, there will be huge social unrest whenever the bankruptcy of Pakistan happens. There will be political instability, possibly a large-scale migration of people wanting to escape their misery. And on the other end, on a strategic and military level, it will give yet another lever for China to act against India. The second top voice on the show to talk about what's happening inside Pakistan, the social political upheaval that is happening in the country and its larger impact. Pakistani author Salman Masood joins us on the show. Thanks, Salman, for speaking to NDTV. I want to ask you this, that you've written extensively about Pakistan's struggles, the political flux it's gone through. Previous Prime Minister is in jail right now. But look at what the deep state has really brought Pakistan to. It wanted the CPEC. And this is the result of what is happening right now.
Right now, the political crisis is still ongoing. There's a big crisis of legitimacy in Pakistan because after the February 8 elections, I think all independent observers agree that if there was a fair contest, Imran Khan's party would have come in a large number. But because the establishment, the Imran Khan's party accuses the establishment of managing the elections, and this has been a constant theme in Pakistani history. That almost all political parties, they accuse the establishment of managing the elections and converting the results to their own favor. So now this big crisis is going on in Pakistan. Imran Khan is in jail, and his party still has a big number in the parliament, but the ruling governing parties, they are facing a legitimacy crisis. So, and Imran Khan's party is, hoping that he gets out of prison. But how they do that, and remains, a key question. There is some disagreement within his party that should they engage politically or should they just take a legal course?
Okay.
Because, Imran has been facing a lot of court cases. And his party says that almost all those cases are trumped up charges.
Right. Imran Khan's fate is undecided. But let's talk about Pakistan's fate. There is a bailout that they want, for which they're going to increase taxes. Without loan restructuring from China, they cannot do better than what they are in the precarious state. But in the midst of all this, Pakistan still wants to go ahead and buy arms.
I think the IMF package will give some breathing space to the government. But as you said, whether the government has been successful in taxing the rich, what was the debt trap, what was the governance, these are really, really big issues which this government has to tackle. And although right now it has a good relationship with the army, it is facing a lot of, I would say, turbulence from the judiciary. There are a lot of cases right now in which there are questions about the last elections, and so let's see. I think there are a lot of challenges. Even if it survives, it will be a very tricky path for the government forward.
I want to ask you this, that what is going to happen about the Pakistan-China equation? They're asking for a bailout, Pakistan is. China is not going to relent. They're not going to give it because they want to colonize Pakistan.
Yes, China has been a very old ally of Pakistan, and recently there has been a bit of a strained relationship because Chinese workers have come under attack, not only in south of Pakistan but also in some northern parts where there were Chinese engineers who were working on some hydro projects. So that violence has sort of strained the relationship, and obviously it's a big challenge for the Pakistani establishment now how they manage the delicate relationship with China. At the same time, they don't want to really offend the Western bloc. So it's a very delicate balance which they are facing.
It's a balance that's run its course. Thanks so much, Salman, for speaking to me. The inside story on the show. Imagine living at most beautiful places on earth, making a living through the city's tourism economy and still asking tourists to leave. That's what locals are now feeling in city after city, which now has too many tourists or facing, believe it or not, over-tourism. That's what happened in Barcelona, where tourists were shooed away because they outnumber locals with almost 8 times, impacting cost of living as prices go up for everything from food to rents. But it's not just Spain, there's a pattern to it. Locals are now trying every trick in the book to ensure that they send tourists back. Take a look. The next time you go to popular tourist places in the world like Spain or Peru, you may not be welcome. In Barcelona's most popular La Rambla area, 2,800 locals squirted tourists with water guns, threw objects and demanded they leave. But Barcelona is not the only city struggling with over-tourism. From Venice to Bali to the iconic Machu Picchu, all are witnessing large local resentment. But it's not just about rowdy tourists littering iconic sites. Locals are fed up with the economic costs of excessive tourism, as all basic needs become costly. As a deterrent, cities are imposing extra fees on tourists. Visits to Venice will now cost an additional £5 and to Amsterdam an additional £11. Denmark, though, has a different plan. Copenhagen is welcoming tourists provided they are well behaved, in which cases they get free lunches and glasses of wine. Governments need to regulate inflow of tourists and invest money earned through additional taxes. Venice earned £1 million through entrance fees in just 11 days. What has it done to improve the life of a Venetian? With that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Sense. Thanks so much for watching.
Some people say the metaverse will only be virtual. One day this lecture hall will be made of code, and driverless cars would be trapped in intersections. But even in this maze of the future, you can't wish away health. It's time to become more resilient. "10 years of Banega Swasth India, we have grown and achieved so many milestones. And now I have a plan to beat the urgency, to stop breathing with difficulty, to relieve getting choked with inactivity. energize our government, our environment, our society, and ourselves. Everyone, everywhere, every day. Banega Swasth India. One world hygiene.
This is a pub that was shut by the excise department. In fact, that was sealed by the excise department. As you can see, the BMC officials cutting off that particular sheet, the black sheet, because this is an illegal extension. And now remains to be seen what other action will be taken.
बिना उसकी उम्र जाने, उसके साथ मौजूद उन दोस्तों के उम्र जाने, उसे आखिरकार शराब कैसे दी गई?
The police's major concern or primary concern at the moment is Mihir Shah and what exactly unfolded that night.
बड़ा आदमी का लड़का है ना, तब ये इधर राजकारण चल रहा है, कुछ नहीं है, ये राजकारणी सब लोग हैं।
The biggest democratic exercise in the world. Team NDTV covers it from ground zero.
BJP really had to fight a tough election this time.
Unprecedented exercise.
भारतीय जनता पार्टी ने ये देश के विकास
Unmatched coverage.
There is no dispute. जनता को decide करना है.
From polling to counting, NDTV brought you the most trustworthy news and updates. Elections mean NDTV.
This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Hello, Moto.
Hello and welcome to the Southern View. I'm Veera Raghav. Lots lined up on the show, but first up, the headlines we're tracking this hour. The showdown over the 1975 emergency escalates as the central government declares June 25th as Samvidhan Hatya Divas, or Black Day for the Constitution. Congress dismisses it as a headline-grabbing exercise. Voting concludes in the Maharashtra MLC polls. The Mahayuti alliance bagged 6 seats. The Mahavikas Angadi gets 1 in what's seen as a test ahead of the assembly polls. Rahul Gandhi takes the high moral ground, defends Smriti Irani against derogatory remarks, says